This is Free Speech TV joining you from Netroots Nation 2025 in New Orleans. I'm Sonali Kolhatkar, host of Rising Up with Sonali, and I'll be bringing you conversations with activists and change makers attending the largest political progressive conference in the United States. And I'm so thrilled right now to be joined by Elaine Brown, former chair of the Black Panther Party, whose panel at Netroots focused on a Panther guide to taking on the Trump administration. Welcome to the program.
Oh, thank you for having me, Sonali.
I spoke with you in 2008 when I was at KPFK, a rookie journalist, and back then I was starstruck. I'm starstruck as well because so many of us look to the work that the Panthers did, the work that activists like you did in those times as a guide for, as a model for how we can face the dark times that we're in today. So what is the advice that you give to people in what worked in the 60s, in the 50s, 60s, 70s, that we can apply today, a time that seems like nothing will work?
Well, I don't know what actually worked. In other words, that would mean like what successes did we have or what failures and so forth. I don't know how we can count it because our goal was to create the conditions for revolutionary change in America. But one thing I think that was important in terms of how we was the question of organizing. So we not only were an organization, we were a disciplined organization. So people came into the party, you were coming in saying to yourself, I'm going to surrender my life to the revolution. That's really what we all felt. And we thought we were going to die anyway. So that was one thing that was very important, to have that kind of commitment, that level of commitment. And to say, because what's the main thing that we're all afraid of? We're afraid to die, really. And once you embrace that idea and say, all right, well, if I'm going to die from this, then I'm ready to do that. So and I'm going to put in everything I have. I'm going to be working 24 hours a day. That's all I'm doing. I'm not getting paid for it. I'm not putting in my nonprofit number, none of that. So that's one thing, that we had a disciplined organization. The second thing is that we formed coalitions with other oppressed groups. So for example, we said, well, the Native American people, the Native people, nobody could be a more oppressed group than they are, and so we helped to form a coalition with the American Indian movement. The same thing was true of Chicanos and the Chicano movement. The Brown Berets came out of the Black Panther Party in Los Angeles. I remember it very well. Same thing with Puerto Ricans. So there was a Puerto Rican quote-unquote gang in Chicago called the Young Lords, and they became a political organization, revolutionary organization that was in a coalition with our Illinois chapter, leader started by Fred Hampton. Even poor whites, we had an organization called the Young Patriots, and the Young Patriot organization was composed of poor white coming up from Mississippi, Kentucky, ridge running, tobacco chewing that would call you nigger in a minute, but began to realize we stood on common ground, and that common ground was we needed housing. They needed it too, and white though they might have been, white wasn't getting them any housing. Whiteness wasn't. And then the same thing was true of other organizations, and we said that Huey Newton, when he got out of prison in 1970, said that we considered that gay liberation and women's liberation were part of our struggle because these were oppressed groups. As a matter of fact, Huey said that he felt that the homosexual, as he said in those days, was perhaps the most oppressed person in America. Now, imagine that we started forming these coalitions. Then we ended up with something like the Gray Panthers forming, and then we had a relationship.
This was elders and
well, old people, yeah. senior citizens. That was their group, but they formed out of that, and we were in a coalition with them. And then we were in a coalition with a place called the Center for Independent Living, which was a group of people advocating for the rights of the disabled. And we worked with a guy named Ed Roberts, who became very well known because after we coalesced with them and we sat in, and we finally got the government to acknowledge, the federal government, to let make federal buildings wheelchair accessible, which led to the bigger movement, and ultimately to the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act. So I'm very proud of that. We had a coalition with an organization called the Trust for Public Land in terms of environmental programs. So we recognized that we brought together as many people who were aligned, because that would be how we would win. We could not win anything as black people by ourselves as much as we would like to. But our goal was the liberation of black people. But our strategy was to recognize that the liberation of black people could not come without revolutionary change, and revolutionary change couldn't come without the participation of the masses of people, because we always say it's the people and the people alone who will create and bring about the revolution. So I would say that in organizing today, people are not willing to put in the kind of time and discipline. That's number one. The second thing, however, the second thing is that we not only are not willing to do that, but we're not willing to coalesce. We don't necessarily see the common ground. Not that, say our allies, or, like gay is first and this is first, or this one, who is worse off. The question is, we don't have to all fall in love and get married, but we do have to recognize that without poor whites, if Donald Trump is attracting poor whites, it's because the movement back in the day did not want poor whites. They wanted all these nice little college students and all these little people that had a little bit of money. The anti-war movement was not filled with poor whites, And so I want to say that, because I think it's important that who is supporting Trump are people that really don't, whose interests he doesn't even represent, but they don't get it. So go ahead.
Yeah, on the issue of economics, which seems to be something that is a through line, right? You were saying being white doesn't give you housing. And so what can we learn from what the Black Panthers did that addressed people's economic needs and showed, simply by doing, instead of waiting for the government to create programs, simply by doing, showed what was possible? And what's the lesson in that for us today?
Well, I think the main thing is you're talking about our various, what we call survival programs, but we also had a slogan by which they operated, and it was survival pending revolution. So this was a way, so for example, feeding children, 10,000 bags of groceries at giving away one time, free clinics, housing. We built some housing too back in the day. Everything that we did was not only to serve the interests of the people directly, but also to serve the broader interest by saying, this is your right. You have a right to housing. So if the Panthers can produce it, why not the government? Now, there was a thing that Lenin said, and we were Marxist-Leninists, but Lenin said that, there was a moment when people talked about, this can happen and the government can accommodate, or the oppressor can accommodate you, and this can happen and that can happen. Now, when the Russians said seize the land, everybody got it. But by this time, they were ready. I want to own my own land, and I'm not going to work as a farmer and just work for you and all of that. I want to own this little plot or whatever. But it was the starting point of the Russian Revolution. Seize the land was the clarion call. So once you would say you would demand breakfast, then you might want to demand lunch. And then next thing you know, you want dinner. Next thing you know, you want housing. Next thing you know, you want free medical care. But you are now built up to not only demand it, but you're going to make the government give it to you. As we used to say, stick them up, because we came from what's ours. We're not begging nobody for anything. This belongs to us, and it is our right to have it. And if you were refusing it, then we're going to have to seize it and make it ours. But so our lesson, even though we weren't, wasn't forever, but it has a model to use. We did, for example, get every school then started having free breakfast programs.
And that continues today in a lot of public school districts. We have free lunches, breakfasts. Right. And I think what you're saying is making me think about sort of creating a culture of expectation, right? I mean, like, for example, if you go to other countries, like in France, people, right. The government proposes one increase in cost and the entire country shuts down. And we don't have that culture.
No, well, we don't, because we're really afraid, but also the French have, for example, everyone has medical health care. Everyone. This is not even an issue. Nobody says, well, how much is this going to cost? No, people are not thinking about medical insurance. They're about medical care. I don't care if I have insurance or not. I just want the care, right? So we get Obamacare, which is an insurance plan. I don't need an insurance plan. I need to know that this government loves its people enough that they represent us, and that you don't want us to die, if we don't have money, you see. So how can we prove that? So we can show you that I can open a clinic, and now you will demand of the government what I just told you. You weren't going to do it before, perhaps, but now you see you could do it, and you should have this. So I think if we got back to any type of an agenda, but the agenda has to be that we are going to organize. That's it. Yeah.
What about lessons from the Panthers about combating government repression? We are in a moment where government is going after activists any which way they can. This is something the Panthers have unfortunately, intimate knowledge of being, having the provocateurs being framed, being wrongfully imprisoned. What are those lessons you can share?
Well, I think the main thing, though, is that from the beginning, from the very beginning, we had a commitment to say that whatever acts of oppression that were visited upon us, that people would suffer a consequence. So you have to do this fearlessly. That doesn't mean you're going to win everything. We knew we could never win a battle with the police, the Oakland PD, much less the whole country. No. Oakland PD can always call the Richmond PD, and the county sheriffs, and the state police, and the highway patrol, and the Coast Guard, and then they can call the National Guard. Then they can call on, the FBI, and they can call on the ATF, and the CIA, and the Army, the Navy, the Marine Corps.
Today it's ICE.
No, it's not ICE. That's wrong. ICE is there's nothing different about what ICE is doing except for it's bold. It's just one more arm of a government that was repressive, okay? Now, the one thing I like about the Latinos that are being picked up is how they're fighting back finally. They're saying, no, we're not going to let you just walk in here and pick people up arbitrarily. But we, in general, the public, haven't really done very much. We have a little protest here, some little stuff like that. But you will have to fight. If you want to be free, you're either going to fight or you're going to just lay down and be an oppressed person. So we didn't have a secret, but one thing we did do when, for example, they raided our offices in Los Angeles in 1969, and we had 11 people in that office, and we fought off 200 plus SWAT team members for 5.5 hours, and we did not die. Now, we didn't win, but we didn't lose. And it was a terrible battle, which anybody can look it up. Point is, at some point you've got to make up your mind how much you want to do, and I think that's the other lesson the party showed. Now, when you say, well, you didn't win, well, we didn't, because the government is very powerful. But we certainly had set forth a blueprint that we didn't have before that, because most of the other people were getting bitten by dogs, to sit in the sit-ins and all that. But we said, no, we're not laying down. We're going to stand up, and this is where I'm coming from today. So similarly, I have a building. I just finished a building and opened it up last year, actually, for people who are very, very low income, very low income. I've got 2 people paying $50 a month to show you how low the income is I'm talking about. And people thought that we couldn't do that either, but I did that because I have the same tenacity. You have to just make up your mind that this is what you're going to do. Once you establish that goal, don't see yourself as incapable of doing it, because I look at it like this. I don't think Elon Musk is smarter than I am. And the reason I don't think so is because it doesn't take much for your daddy to steal from the mines of South Africa like every other racist Dutchman and what a Boer, whatever it is that he is. And so now you have you have a lot of money to work with from the theft that your father performed, and you've got nothing but government contracts. What is it that you have done? I'm trying to figure that out. That's so unique. And you got Tesla started with Sergey Brin, the co-founder of Google. It's like Zuckerberg. Zuckerberg had no idea how to code. I don't even know if he can code today. He didn't graduate from college. So why do we think these people are smarter? They're more ruthless. They get the drill, they figure out where the money is, and they're willing to do anything to get it. They have less principles, but I don't think they're smarter. So I start with that I'm really capable of doing this. I may not know how to do it, but I'll figure that out in a minute.
Finally, Elaine Brown, are you hopeful about the future?
Oh, of course. What else is there to be but hopeful? There's no, I mean, nothing else you can be. I mean, Trump will come and go, but what is the real difference between him and the presidency? It's the institution of the presidency. He has, pardon me, so much power because we've created that. We've created that. And we're not even arguing. We're like, we want to go back to democracy. Well, when was that? I don't recall there being a democracy in this country. I mean, Joe Biden, when he was a senator, he is the reason that we have Clarence Thomas sitting on the Supreme Court. Okay, he denounced Anita Hill. He supported Clarence Thomas. Obama, what's the first thing he did? Oh, I want to bail out the banks. I'm sorry. Were the banks around here hungry, groveling for food, trying to get housing? Where did this even come from? Billions and billions of tax. What's the difference between Trump's tariffs and Obama's bailout? You tell me. It's just that Trump is a crude person. And so people don't like how crude he is. Like, I'm just going to do this. And, you know, and Obama seems like a reasonable man. This is a guy who ends his career killing Gaddafi. Gaddafi was the only friend black people had in Africa at the time. No, seriously. So for me, this is just, you know, unveiled, unbridled fascism. But when was this country serving the interests? Why was the Black Panther Party around with Nixon? When Nixon was a better president? Bush was a better president, you know, Reagan was a better president. Where does this come from? This illusion that he's trying to take our democracy. When did this all happen? Was I living in another world? I did live in France for 7 years, but which was a totally different environment in terms of social programs and the government recognizing that this is a government of and for and by the people and serving the people's interests. But other than that, I don't think I missed the democracy that the United States was. When was it this great democracy to serve why were black people fighting for the vote as late as 1965? Why were we fighting to sit in a bathroom, to use a public toilet? Are you serious? What about this gave us equal rights under the law? No. Why are we having so many black men going to prison? How many people have been beaten up long before Donald Trump, long before in the era of Biden, in the era of Obama? Incarceration rate doubled after Clinton put through the three strikes crime bill. So I don't think there's anything in particular other than Trump has exposed the face of fascism in America, and now we see it, and it's affecting a lot of white people for the first time. So that may be the only real difference. I think that we will go on because we, human beings, we have the will to live. We're not trying to create a world where we're going to die. And so the fact that we want to live, we will eventually get back to an agenda that the Black Panther Party had and so many other organizations have now, but are not really acting on. So, of course, I'm hopeful.
Elaine Brown, thank you so much for this time. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you.
My guest has been Elaine Brown, former chair of the Black Panther Party. She just did a panel at Netroots Nation focusing on a Panther guide to taking on the Trump administration. I'm Sonali Kolhatkar, host of Rising Up with Sonali, here broadcasting from Netroots Nation 2025 in New Orleans for Free Speech TV.